Good morning, everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports Talks, one-on-one with Keith Engle. Great to have you with us this morning. Everybody watching this morning on Facebook, the TGI Sports Talk Facebook platform, our YouTube platform, our X platform. We're live on Roku, the national streaming sports Roku channel. Make sure you're downloading those apps. Got that app, guys. It's free. And we have a lot of great content coming from national streaming sports, as well as all the TGI Sports Talk content. Quick shout out, thumbs up DDH, by the way. Quick shout out to Ralph Williams at RW Media. Ralph does some great stuff there in the Pittsburgh area, specifically the Sports Corner with Smoke and Jim Frazier every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. And Ralph does some other great stuff through the course of the week as well. Sports and other stuff in society, which we try to avoid when we can here. My quick thanks to my guest last week, Paul Rosen, para athlete, para hockey player, sitting volleyball player, won a gold medal at the Paralympics in 2006. He's coaching now hockey in Australia. We had a great conversation with Paul. Great reception. My guest today will be Jim Sundberg, former one of the best defensive catchers I can remember in my younger days, and maybe since my younger days with the Texas Rangers, later with the Brewers and Royals, and he won a World Series in 1985. We've had several of the 85 Royals on with our interview show. We're happy that Jim's joining today. 6 consecutive Gold Gloves. He's in the Rangers Hall of Fame. He's written a couple books, which let me put a picture up here before I bring him in here quickly, because I do want to push the books a little bit for him. Got to be smarter than the technology to try to work, Keith. Remember? We've been there before. Oh, my God. Let's put this first one up here. I don't know if it's the first one. I think it's the first one. I don't know which order they came out. The first one was how to win at sports parenting, navigating your parenting role. Very important stuff, I can tell you right now, guys, based on what I've seen in the world, and I'm sure we all have. And then real quick, let me put up another one before I bring Jim in. We have, that's not the one, this one. I'll share the screen, Keith. I used to be much better at this when I was young. We like to get the book shared when we can. If I got I think it's this one now. All right, here we go. Second book, Sports Parenting, Maximizing the Sports Experience for You and Your Child. And we'll get into some of that. Jim's done a lot of stuff, by the way, after baseball. Both he's been in broadcasting, he's been an executive, he's been in the private sector, putting sports training equipment together. The books, as I mentioned, he does motivational speaking, lots of great stuff. We'll get into a lot of that today with Jim, and we'll talk about the game today, his career, the game today, and with that, Mr. Jim Sundberg is with us. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Keith. Thank you. Great to be with you.
There's so many things you've done that it's hard. The intro gets longer than the interview sometimes. Great. I mean, you've done a varied career here. So congratulations. And you still appear to be keeping yourself busy these days as well.
Yeah, I'm still learning to begin to retire.
I try to figure out. Yeah, I want to figure that out myself in about a year. My wife retired a couple of years ago, and every day she's like, "Will you retire already?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe one more year." But not from this. This is fun. This is for fun. I mean, my real world job. I do thank you for coming in today. I mean, I've had, and we'll get into a lot of this. We'll probably bounce around a little bit. I've had several, as I mentioned, of the 85 Royals on. Buddy Biancalana was on just a few weeks ago, as I mentioned to you. My very first guest when I started doing this like 5 years ago was, I think, a good friend of yours. And if not, I apologize, Greg Pryor. I know you guys have done we're doing some stuff on Facebook yourselves for a while. And I got Brett Saberhagen coming on in a few weeks. So it's good, a lot of fun, a lot of 85 Royals.
Sure is. That was a great club. It was a fun club to be on, and we occasionally get together, and it's terrific when we do that.
I'm going to try to fix your audio real quick because I got a little bit of, and it could be when I was messing with your audio. Let me just try something here because you're a little choppy for some reason. Let me just play with that for real quick.
Okay.
Second. And sometimes I gotta try to get just say, "Hey Keith, love being on your show."
Hey, Keith, how's it going? Good to be with you.
Let's try that. I think we might have something now. When I do that, I usually want to get a compliment. That's how I get a compliment. I say your mic is no good, and then I say something nice about Keith. So, Jim, love having you on. I mean, I love that era growing up. I mean, baseball to me has changed a lot. I still love the game. I'm sure you do. There's no doubt it's changed. When you were growing up, you grew up in. Help me out with the pronunciation of the town you grew up there in Illinois.
Gillsburg.
Is it that simple? It looks harder. I don't know why for a guy like me. Gillsburg, Illinois,
Yeah.
Big baseball star, went to Iowa. I know you got drafted several times before you actually signed. You wanted to go to school at Iowa? Was that a big deal for you to go to college at that point in time?
Well, Keith, it was interesting because I was drafted in the 5th round, and if you were a 5th round draft pick today, and when I was in the front office with the Rangers, I went into the draft room several times, and if you were a 5th round draft pick, not only would you probably have your pick of schools to go to, quality schools to go to, but teams would be talking to you months, weeks, days before the draft, and then on draft day they would be talking to you. Well, back in '69, when I was drafted by the Oakland A's, I found out about it 2 weeks after the draft by reading it in the Sporting News.
Oh, that's too funny.
And at that point in time, I think the plan was to try to play professionally and not really go to school. I had not even at that point in time of the draft had a college offer, and then based on the recommendation, who went to the University of Iowa, she wrote a letter to the athletic department uh, endorsing me, and based on that letter, the assistant coach came out to a game that I played in Iowa City one day, and it was the best game I had ever played. And so they offered me a scholarship after the game, and that's the only offer I got. And I ended up going to Iowa. Uh, Oakland, who had drafted me, never even called me until like 2 days before school started,
That's
which was really at that point too late.
So
So things have changed.
Weeks and weeks go by, and the team that drafts you doesn't even contact you. That's shocking.
I've lost your.
You cannot hear me? Can you hear me at all, Jim? Something happened here real quick. I don't know what. Let me pop you out and pop you back in. We lost. Yeah. How about now? Hang on one second. How about now, Jim? How about now? Oh my gosh, what happened? We're having all kinds of technical difficulties here today. It's the first time in a while. We're all white was the last time I had these troubles. Yeah, Jay, they're telling me they can't hear you. Jim, do me a favor, pop out. You're not going to hear me. Can you pop out and come back in? Jump out, come back in. Can you? Let me put this up. Let me try something. Sorry, guys, for this technical difficulties. We don't normally have this problem. Don't know what's going on today with Jim. How about now, Jim? How about now, Jim? All right. Wasn't sure what to do. Muted you. Edit mic, edit name. Hang on. Let me try something, Jim. Read the comment. Crap. Guys, this is great radio. This is a great show today we're doing, but we'll get you there. See if Jim can read this, hopefully. I can't call him Dave. It won't work that way, unfortunately. Can you read this? Check the screen. Can you read the comment? Leave and pop back in, could you? There you go. We'll have Jim right back in. We got Jim Sundberg with us, and I apologize for technical difficulties this morning, guys. Every once in a while, it happens.
I got you now.
You got me now? Okay.
No, sorry, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't. It's funny. There was a little glitch when you were talking. You disappeared, popped back in, and then I could hear you, but when I started talking, you couldn't hear me. That's weird. So anyway, and I apologize, everybody. Every once in a while, we have these technical difficulties. I had them a while back with, years ago with Roy White. I had Roy White on, and we kept getting echoes and everything else. We fought through it, but what I said when you got through there, I find that amazing that the A's drafted you. And weeks later, you still had not heard from them. I mean, today they're calling people the minute they call their name, right? I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really was. It was absolutely shocking. It was very confusing. And today there's a ruling that you can't really do that. You've got to you got to talk to the person on the day of the draft. And so, but they called 3 days before I started school at Iowa. And if they had probably made that offer back a couple of months before, I may have been playing for the Oakland A's at that time. But as it turned out, I really needed the extra years to tour at Iowa, and so I'm thankful for that.
So no regrets there. I mean, you obviously go on to Iowa and have a really good career there. You get to go experience a college World Series at that time. Was it? And that's huge now. What was it like then playing in that event?
Well, it was huge in our mind. I mean, it didn't have the publicity, the exposure, the cameras, and all of that as it has today. But it was exciting to play. And we got beat really the first two games. We scored 5 runs in the first game against Temple, and they came back and scored 5, and then I think the score ended up being like 10-9, and we got beaten. And Arizona State beat.
That's amazing. So no regrets not getting back by going or signing with Oakland, but you were drafted again before the Rangers drafted you. Who actually was that team that drafted you the second time?
Well, actually, Texas had drafted me twice. They drafted
twice. Okay.
Junior year at Iowa in the 5th round, and then eventually drafted me in the winter draft, second pick in the draft the following winter. But it's interesting. The scout came in and basically said, you can't hit, you can't catch, you're never going to make it you throw everything in the center field, you're never going to make the big leagues, but I'll give you a chance for 6,000. Well, they didn't fly very well with me, and so I didn't sign. They turned around and drafted me again, which I couldn't believe. I was in shock when I found that out. How can a club draft me when they don't think I'm any good and never going to make it to the big league? Well, that was the scout's role, was to demean you at that point. It's probably why agents became so prevalent in the game, is because they treated players so poorly. And but after some advice, I took it and then signed with the Rangers, and then was in the big leagues in a year.
So you obviously didn't have any agent, as you said then. Who was advising you? Was it your dad or your family?
Well, there was a college summer coach that I had played for in Grand Junction, Colorado, Sam Simplizio, and he said, "Look," he said, "Jim, the Rangers don't have any catching. Chances are you can move up quickly. Why don't you ask for the incentive bonus and the rest of your college education, and bypass the scout, go directly to the farm director," which I did. And when I talked to the farm director, he said, "Done, deal done." So I was a Ranger.
Interesting. And you mentioned you go through the farm system. Did you expect to go through the farm system in 1 year? I mean, you go right to Double-A, which is pretty good to begin with. Pittsfield, right? You played Pittsfield?
Pittsfield Double-A, went from Double-A and then to the big leagues. I played winter ball in the fall of '73, where Billy Martin saw me catch, and that's when I think he decided I was going to be his catcher the following year, and went to spring training, found out that he was uh, uh, had liked me, had seen me play, and was planning on that. I wish he would have told me, Keith, earlier, because I went home after instructional league in the fall winter of '73 and worked in a factory putting compressors in the back of refrigerators on an assembly line. I would have never done that probably.
And you going back to Pittsfield real quick. It's not far from where we are, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. If it's Pittsfield, Massachusetts, I'm assuming it was. I'm near the Saratoga area in New York, near Albany, so it's not far to Pittsfield. Used to go up to games there a lot. What was your experience like? And Chris F. one of he's our Toronto correspondent. He's our good friend up there in Canada. He talks about you playing under 100 games and being in the big leagues that we just talked about. But he mentions Jim Klein, your manager there, and who passed away here a few years back. What were your thoughts about Pittsfield and playing for Jim Klein and his influence on your career?
We loved Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I was afraid to have little baby, and we loved that area a lot. And actually, it's Joe Klein. Joe Klein
Okay.
was a terrific coach to have. He would end up being a general manager for the Rangers later on.
Yeah.
But it was a good relationship, and he was great to play for.
You came up with Mike Hargrove. Did Mike Hargrove come up from Double A at the same time you guys in '74?
He actually came from A-ball. He was
A-ball, right?
So on the '74 Ranger team, Mike made it from A-ball. I made it from Double A. The Rangers had traded for Ferguson Jenkins, and so there was and then of course Billy was manager, and a lot of good things happened in '74.
That team won like 54 games or something in '73, didn't they? And you guys gave the world champions a good run for their money in '74. That's one of the great seasons, I think, kind of just out of nowhere that I can remember watching baseball in my younger life.
Yeah, and it was the first year that they ended up having over 1 million in attendance, and at that point, Oakland came in. We were 3 games back in the last week of the season. Oakland came in to play 3 games. We had a chance to, if we swept them, to tie, but they swept us.
Yeah,
6 games back. But it was, very few people remember how close we were in that last week of the season.
I remember because I've read a couple of books. I'm a Yankee fan, but I like to read baseball about in the '70s. I'll read anything you can put in front of me. And a book I read a long time ago was called Seasons in Hell, and it was about the Rangers, and a lot of it focused on that '74 season. I don't know if you know the book that well, but
I've heard, yeah,
it's very well done. How instrumental, and again, Billy took chances on you, and Mike Hargrove again come out of A-ball, and I know there was some other Jim Bibby brings into that team, and Fergie Jenkins, as you said, joined it. Was Billy instrumental? I mean, he's got to be instrumental in turning us around. I just had his son on a couple of weeks ago for an interview as well, Billy Jr. And he said his dad loved Texas. We're a Cowboy half for the rest of his life, I think, after that. But what was it like playing for Billy, and how instrumental was he in this team's success, or what else was behind this team's success?
Well, he was really instrumental. He was very motivational. He was charismatic. You would do anything for Billy. And everything that happened went well. The moves he made went well. The players he brought into that club played well. He did, and he was tough on catchers. Bill Freehand told me, he goes, be ready because he's going to be tough. He thinks a lot of the game centers around the catcher, and he's going to be tough on the catcher. And he was tough. He was tough, but I respected him and made it through that first year.
What was it? It also tied into this. You're 22 years old, right? I believe, if I got the time. And you got guys like Ferguson Jenkins, who'd been around forever, won Cy Young awards in the National League, won 20 games 5 years in a row over there before he got traded. What's it like? Is it intimidating? pitching with these, and Jim Bibby, I think, was a fairly well-rounded play. The next year, you got Jim. I think Gaylord Perry was there the next year. Speaking of, type A personalities, was it nerve-wracking? Did you adjust really quickly? How was that?
Well, I caught Fergie my first major league game, and I grew up a Cub fan and watched Fergie a lot of times. And he was a multiple 6-time 20-game winner coming into the 74 season.
Yeah.
And so the first game I caught him, he threw a one-hitter against the Oakland A's and beat them 1-0. So that was my first major league game. I was really nervous, but Fergie made it easy. Fergie had amazing command, threw the ball where he wanted to, and there was such a great flow. I mean, in my first major league game, and I had a lot to learn as a game caller, but it was easy to work with Fergie. I would end up working with 9 Hall of Famers, and you mentioned Gaylord. He would be the second one that I would work with. But Fergie was probably the best, and Nolan Ryan was my last major league game. So I would say Fergie was the best pitcher of that group that I caught. He had because he had command. He was easy to work with. He worked fast. We in '75 we worked together on a game in Oakland that went an hour and 40 minutes.
Uh-oh.
Do you have me? Okay, and so hour and 40 minutes. So he was great to play behind.
Can you hear me now, Sue?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Last time that happened, that's when we lost me. I mean, that staff. I mean, you've got to get that credit, and Billy maybe gets some of that credit. But a lot of those guys, Fergie had a tremendous year. Maybe it might have been his best year, in a lot of ways. Jim Bibby had a very good year, maybe his best year. I know he had a good year with the Pirates later on, but I think that might have been his best year. Jackie Brown has one of his best years. Is that because of both yourself? And again, it's hard to pat yourself on the back sometimes, but I mean, what do you attribute that to more than anything? Those guys really coming together.
I think it was the momentum and the atmosphere that Billy laid out, and it was like it's a good team. You're gonna win. You're gonna play. Bibby was that year, and so he almost won 20 games. Had a chance to win his 20th on the last day of the season, but got sick. And so Fergie took the ball on 3 days rest and won his 25th game. So, but you mentioned Fergie. It probably was he was 25-12.
Yeah.
I think 28 complete games. That unbelievable. And so there was just Jeff Burrows would end up being the MVP. Mike Hargrove would edge me out for Rookie of the Year. Fergie was Comeback Player of the Year because Catfish Hunter got the Cy Young that year.
Yeah.
Then Billy was Manager of the Year. So we took 4 major awards that year, and it was just a very positive atmosphere the whole year.
Was there a friendly rivalry with you and Mike Hargrove as you went through that year? Did you feel like you were battling for that award with Mike?
They're actually roommates, and so we had a good relationship, and we hung around a lot and did a lot together, and it was a friendly competition. I hit September. I was hitting 280. If I had managed to keep that statistic, I probably would have won it. But I had not caught more than 100 games in a year, and that year I think I caught 132, and I just kind of fizzled out. I just got real. I got tired and didn't understand how to compete in a full 162 game schedule, and so but Mike, we had a good relationship. Mike won it, and it turned out well.
Was Mike already in it? Because I don't remember that specific. I remember that year and watching him play, actually, when we would get the Rangers. It's in 1974. You weren't getting a lot of out-of-market teams to see the play, obviously. But when I did see Mark Hargrove, was he already the human rain delay at that point, as it became known as later on?
Yeah, he shoulders, stepping out, doing his thumb, and doing a few things. Yeah, he was ahead of his time.
He sure was. Yeah, now everybody does it, right? I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, just make guys stop adjusting every piece of their body to speed the games up. You don't need a pitch clock, for crying out loud. So.
And that's why we've got the speed clock now, is because hitters started getting out of the box after every pitch, and pitchers were taking time, and I actually love the speed clock. It makes the games much better to watch. You very few 3.5 hour games now, and it's much, for me, it's much more enjoyable. But now I know there's a lot of fans that actually love the longer games.
Well,
Longer, drink longer.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need games to drag on for 4 hours. Yankee Boston games used to last like 4.5 hours, for crying out loud. It was terrible. And I'm diverging a little bit. We would have got to this later. Do you feel like the pitching today? I have a theory. Well, first of all the injuries with the pitch. Do you think pitch clock is contributing to the injuries? I mean, there's a couple factors. Just go out there and throw as hard as you can for as long as you can, and the pitch clock. And I have a theory that it's because pitchers don't throw enough. Nolan Ryan, which we'll get to later, when he came back to the Rangers, I know was trying to change some of that and actually have pitchers throw between starts and expect to throw more pitches, more innings, more important innings. I mean, all of that to me is contributing to pitchers getting hurt more. What are your thoughts on that topic while we're there?
Book How to Win Sports. We're doing surveys.
Breaking up on me a little bit.
Pardon me?
You're breaking up just a little bit.
Start to understand some things about youth sports. And can you hear me now?
Yeah.
And so to address that question, I think there's two things going on. One is we get pitchers who already have a lot of innings on their arms once they get to the big leagues. From youth sports, from throwing very early. Terry Wood, Mark Pryor were probably the front end posters of pitchers throwing too much. Because of that, and you've got added attention to maximum velocity. Everybody's throwing maximum speed, maximum velocity. That took a little bit off the fastball, locate, throw it in a spot. But today, they're just max effort. I think the thing, they come to the big already. And that's really cause. That's why you have.
Yeah, I've lost your volume again there, Jim. I'm not sure why. I'll take that out. I wonder if that's affecting us at all. Try me again. Yeah, we're getting a little bit of interference now and again when you talk, and then you fade out a little bit, but I'm not sure what's going on. I keep trying to adjust it on my end. You're good now.
Okay, good.
So again, I think I got the gist of what you're saying. Again, you think, because my theory was, they don't throw as much. I mean, guys were throwing 300 innings back in the 70s, and I mean, I'm sure they had arm injuries and probably pitched through them is part of it too. But and I see a lot of throwing, and maybe you were talking a little bit about this. To me, there's more throwers than pitchers.
Right.
Yeah, we don't.
Yes. Guys looking, it's just looking for speed, looking for effort. You got the speed clock, looking for speed, and so you're putting a lot of stress on the arm on arms that already have stress from childhood.
Yeah, it's really sad what we're seeing with some of the pitchers today. And why weren't they getting hurt? Were they hurt back in your day? Were they hurt and they just pitched through it, or these injuries started happening? Why?
Well, they called it sore shoulder, but uh, or tired shoulder. There's a lot of rotator cuffs,
Yeah,
but uh, again, Fergie didn't start pitching till he was 16 years old, and I think there just wasn't the youth sports going on like today. Our The Rangers orthopedic specialist who does a lot of the arms today, Keith Meister. Uh, he sent me an article a number of years ago from Sports Illustrated, I believe it was, and it had two maps of the United States. It had a hitter's map and a pitcher's map, and the hitter's map was made up of major league hitters who had 100 or more home runs. The pitcher's map was pitchers that had 100 or more wins. And predominantly, the pitchers were from the north and the hitters were from the south,
interesting.
meaning that there was a short season in the north. You couldn't play, but today they're playing year round. And so I honestly believe, after having looked at this a lot, that uh, we're getting pitchers that have a lot of innings on their arms uh, going back. And doctors will talk about the number that if you throw a number too many pitches or breaking balls before the age of 14, when the growth plates in the shoulder
Mm.
close up, that it can be an issue. And so I think it's my opinion that's why they have a lot of the problems that they have today.
And if I heard you before when we're having a little bit of sound difficulties, you were saying you talk about some of this stuff in your books about sports parenting as well.
Yes, and I don't quite dive into the pitching. That kind of came. A lot of the information came in after that. The sports parenting books were really designed to try to help the parent navigate the experience and make it better for themselves and their children. And so um, I have 8 game day parent personalities in there, which talks about 8 parent personalities that I saw while watching my girls play volleyball. I had a son that played baseball and who played at Auburn. I had an older daughter that played volleyball at Auburn, and then my youngest did not play. But we had 3 competitive kids, and so I dive into how to manage your emotions, what to do if you start getting upset, um, and just a number of different elements that help a parent navigate the stressful sports experience that they've made it out to be.
Well, I will recommend any young parent get out there and check these books out, because a lot of you can use some guidance here, and not all of you. You're not all. I don't want to lump everybody together, but from what I've seen, a lot of people can use a little bit of guidance in this. And you can get the books. I found them on Amazon. I'm sure you can find them
Right.
in a lot of other places too. So we want to help you kind of push those books too, and we'll post them on the page later too. Kind of going back to where we were. So we talked about Billy and Billy's influence on his team, and as was Billy's wont, Billy comes in and turns teams around. And then when things different with Billy, when things weren't going as well the next year, did you see a change in Billy, or what was the situation like?
It was a huge change.
Yeah.
It was sad, and it was and I think he had trouble with he had a drinking issue that was coming into play. He got mad, um, and you no longer he no longer had the charisma, nor would you really want to follow him. He was angry. He started
Yeah.
blaming things on the players, and and so there was a total changeover in the second year, and so he I think was fired somewhere around mid-season of that year of 75.
Yeah, he got the job with the Yankees about 2 days later, I think, after he got fired by the Rangers. Old
Yeah.
Timers Day, he got hired. They fired Bill Verdon, who'd had a pretty good year the year before. Yankees also had a great year in '74. They'd been down for a long time, and they were in a pennant race, similar to the Rangers in the East. So it was kind of interesting symmetry there. The guy that replaced him was Frank Lucchesi, who's really his claim to fame was you had to have been there with the Lenny Rendell incident. I'm guessing, right? What was that like being involved in that? Were you there as that was going on?
I was just feet away from that happening. I had just gotten my bat. I just got my bat and was headed to the batting cage to take some BP. And I noticed when I was walking, and I had forgot my helmet. And when I was going to the batting cage, I noticed Frank and Lenny face to face. And when I turned around to go get my batting helmet, I just heard these punches hit land, and turned around, and Frank was on the ground. Frank was laid out on the ground. Lenny was competing with Bump Wills for the
Yeah.
second base job that spring, and things weren't going well for Lenny, and Lenny got upset, and so they had been calling each other names in the paper, and it kind of got ugly, and it was sad with what happened.
Was that out of character for Lenny? I've tried to have Lenny in the show. We haven't really been able to hook up, but was that out of character for him?
Yeah, I was really surprised. I was really surprised. I didn't think that was something that he could do, and I think there was a lot of tension too.
Yeah.
I think there was pressure. He had the job, and he was losing it.
Interesting. Guys, my guest this morning is Jim Sundberg, former All-Star catcher, Gold Glove winner for 6 consecutive seasons and champion with the Royals. A lot of your guys' questions I'll get to at the end because I try to keep the flow going a little bit. I don't want to kind of go back and forth, so I'll get to those questions at the end. Staying on Lenny Randle for 1 second, there's a very famous video. I can't remember if he was with the Rangers, and I talk about, rules MLB puts in and how players used to police things themselves on the field. And there's a very famous video of Lenny who got thrown at, and he bunts and he just levels the pitcher on his way to first base. Was he with the Rangers then?
Yeah, in fact, that was a week. That happened a week before 10-cent beer night. Cleveland was in town, and Milt Wilcox was pitching, and he threw a ball really high and tight on Lenny. And I'm sitting next to Billy in the dugout, and Billy jumps off the bench and yells at Lenny, bunt the ball down the first base line and run up the pitcher's back.
Oh, Billy gave him the order.
Billy gave him the order. Lenny had looked over. He got Lenny's attention. He looked over and he told him that. Next pitch, he bunted down the first base line and just leveled Milt Wilcox. Well, the fight broke out, and then so the next week we go to Cleveland for 10-cent beer night.
Yeah,
and that's how that was the precursor to 10-cent beer night, and then that evening was a crazy night.
Were you ever? I mean, were you? That was a crazy night, and I just watched a documentary about the whole thing somewhere on YouTube. Did you fear for your safety that day? I mean, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen on a ball field.
We really did. It was in the bottom of the ninth, and we had a lead going into the last inning, and they got some. They were scoring some runs. They had the winning and tying runs at second and third, and I thought, we're going to get beat. And then someone came out of the right field bleachers and started hassling Jeff Burrows, tried to take his glove, his hat, and Jeff popped him. And then everybody in the Ranger dugout, Billy. There's a picture of Billy with a bat leading the charge from the Ranger dugout. And so I made a mistake of dropping my mask, and I headed out. But there was a time out there that if the Cleveland Indian players had not come to our aid in that thing, it was getting dangerous. And but they really came to our aid, and the fans seemed to back off when the Indian players were out there.
Yeah, I think that was the last 10-cent beer night too in Major League Baseball for sure. There was a similar incident a couple years later with Disco Demolition Night with the White Sox. I know, but there was a similar type of almost riot, but not.
Right.
Well, I guess it was geared probably by beer and whatnot.
I'm sure.
What you play for the Rangers for what? I want to say I'm not good at math. I'm looking at my 11 years.
11 and a half years.
11 and a half years. The team's always. You never played on a really bad team, but the team never got over the top. I think the best record and the best season other than 74 was in 78 under Billy Hunter. Well, actually, you had a few managers before Billy Hunter got there, and in 78, that was kind of weird. What was that whole situation like with Eddie? That was 78, right? Was Eddie Stanky, and then
that was the year that Lenny and Frank got in a fight. Frank started the season off, and then we had Eddie Stanky came in for one day, and then said, I think I made a mistake. I should probably go home. We won the game.
Yeah,
we won the game. We don't know what scared him off, but and then Connie Ryan, one of the coaches, took over for a couple of weeks, and then he said he didn't really want the job. And then after that came in Billy Hunter, and that was on I believe the 28th of June. And from that point on, we won a lot of games. We ended up actually winning 94 games that year, but Kansas City, I think, won 102.
Yeah,
and beat us out. But that was a good team, a good ball team, and 94 wins is a lot of wins in a season. So
well, you'd make the playoffs today probably. So
yeah.
Would that team have had a chance if we had the rules that we have today as far as playoff teams? Would you think that teams would have had a chance to win a World Series?
I think so, because we were playing well. We most of our wins came in that second half of the season, and we were charging hard. And had we probably would have been a wild card berth, and would have had an opportunity to play postseason and see where it went from there. But our pitching was good. Doc Medich, and I think Fergie was still on the team. I'm trying to remember who was on that. Who was the starting pitchers were on the
78? I think it was there. Yeah.
Back then, but anyway, I don't remember the rotation that we had, because it changed over pretty rapidly, pretty quickly during that time period, and but it was a good team.
What again, as I said, you had decent teams almost every year. I mean, you didn't play in a bad team your first time around with Texas. A bad team. What did hold you guys back? Is there something you can point to there where we just couldn't get over the top because of this?
Well, you know what's really interesting is that prior to Billy Martin, Joe Burke was the president of the Rangers, and Whitey Herzog was manager in there. Yeah. And those two guys, they go to Kansas City and turn it into a dynasty. I think that could have been a mistake early on by management, because those Joe Burke and Whitey Herzog were top guys, and of course then John Schuerholz joined them in Kansas City, and so for years they had a great team. I think it had a lot to do with office management, and I played for 16 managers in 16 years, and 2 of them twice. Had 18 manager changes in 16 years. 4 of those in 1 year that we talked about just moments ago. But there was just a large turnover in the management, and it's stable.
It's funny, people talk about the Yankees during that era, and George was turning over managers right and left, but he wasn't the only guy doing it, as this example shows. So when your time comes to end, your first time around in Texas, what were your feelings as you were moved on? You went to Milwaukee in a trade. Did you want to get out of Texas at that point in time, or was it a shock to you?
No, it's interesting. The Rangers had tried to trade me the year before to the Dodgers, and it was a trade for Dave Stewart, Orel Hershiser, Bert Hooton, and one other player. It was 4-for-1. That was
Oh,
before Stewart had a split finger. It was before they realized that Orel Hershiser had actually any talent, and I declined the trade, which I could,
yeah.
because the Dodgers wanted. I had a long term contract at that point, and the Dodgers wanted me to um, renegotiate the contract, and I said I'm not going to renegotiate the contract. They wanted to give me a 30% cut off of a guaranteed contract, so I
Mm.
said, I'm not going to. I'm not bleeding Dodger blue that much. I'm not going to do that. So the trade fell through, and it made for a miserable 10th season in
Hmm.
Texas. And so when you asked me was I ready to go, I wasn't ready to go in the ninth season, but after season 10, I was ready to go, and Milwaukee was a great place for me to go.
It wasn't a great team that year. Maybe one of the worst teams you got to play on, but your experience there was good. I mean, you played with the team had just come off of a couple of years ago a World Series appearance, so there's still some great
Right.
players there in Yount, Cecil Cooper, etc. Still a good experience even with a tough season.
It was a great experience. There were guys that got hurt. Raleigh Fingers got hurt. Molitor
Yeah.
got hurt. Yount went from shortstop to center field. And Cecil Cooper was not playing well, and Ted Simmons was not playing well. There were guys that Ben Ogilvy didn't play well. Some of our other pitchers didn't, and so I think it was a frustrating season for Milwaukee fans. I ended up making the All Star team that year,
Mm-hmm.
and so for us to get out of the heat of Texas and to play in Milwaukee, we loved it. We thought it was a great place, and we enjoyed the season.
Why do you suppose you were only there the one season before you moved on to the Royals?
Well, Harry Dalton told me. That's a great question. Harry Dalton told me when I went to Milwaukee, he goes, Jim, we've got a young catcher named Bill Schroeder that's coming up, and you're going to catch until we think he's ready. Well, in August, after the All Star game, and in August that season of '84, I got hurt. I hurt my back. I was on the DL. In fact, it was the only time I was on the DL in 16 years. I hurt my back, and I was out for about 3 weeks. And they brought him up, and he hit like 7 or 8 home runs. And so I'm sitting there, uh, uh, out of the of and on the at that time disabled list, and thinking, you know what, I may not play when I come back. I'm going to go from being an all star to sitting the bench in the course of a couple of months, less than 2 months. So I thought, well, the Brewers are either going to trade me in the off season, or they're going to have me sit around. And I don't want to sit around. And if they're going to trade me, I had the option to ask to be traded, because of my tenure in the big leagues. If I asked the Brewers to trade me, then I reduced their ability to trade to any one of 28 down to 12. I gave the Brewers 12 teams that I could go to, and Kansas City was one of those. And so that's what happened. They they ended up using Bill Schroeder that next year, but I went to Kansas City and then got to partake in that great season.
Yeah, initially, were you happy to be going to Kansas City initially when the trade was made?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the teams I put on that list, and it was I had liked from a visitor. I loved going to Kansas City. I liked Dick Hauser. Dick Hauser, as it turned out, wanted to get me. He felt like I'd be a key component to a young pitching staff.
Yeah.
And so they made the trade, and I was very happy about that.
Well, that was actually one of my questions about, when you come up, it's interesting how things, cycle through in baseball or in life in general. When you come up, you're a kid catching a bunch of veterans. Fergie Jenkins, one of the great pitchers, certainly of his era. And then as you move on, you're kind of the older guy catching a bunch of young guys. Like Saberhagen
Right.
was only, what was Saberhagen? 20, I don't know, 21, 22, 21. Yeah.
Two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a great young pitching staff. Saberhagen, Gubiza, Danny Jackson,
Yeah.
Bud Black, Charlie Lee Brandt. Three young guys with two veterans. And I loved the staff. I loved catching the staff. And it's the only staff in 16 years that was intact, the only starting staff that was intact without injuries the whole year. I mean, they were grinders, and they were talented, and it was fun to work with them.
That was an interesting team, and obviously you got George Brett, and you still got Hal McRae playing, and there's some great players on this team, but
right.
The whole season didn't go well. You guys didn't get hot until, Buddy Biancalana was taking credit for it here a few weeks ago, driving this. I was giving him credit, actually. He wasn't taking credit. But Buddy gets in the lineup, and they did get hot. The team did get hot. And what changed for that team? And, struggling a little bit through the season into September and chasing, I believe, the Angels, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Tell us about how that season changed and turned around so quickly.
Well, I was after one ball game evening, I was shaving by the in the locker room, and George Orta was standing there next to me, shaving, and he goes, "Jim, I tell you one thing, we're going to win this thing." I'm going like, "Whoa, we are!" We were about 7 games back at that time, just after the All-Star break, and for some reason he knew that we were going to do that, and we just caught fire. We gradually caught the Angels, and then passed them the last week of the season. They came in to play. They came in 1 game ahead to play a 4-game series, and when they left, we were ahead 1 game, and so we were able to charge the starting rotation went into full swing about I want to say the second week of September, and they never stopped all the way through the playoffs and the World Series. The guys, every one of them was on their game at the same time, and that's a huge reason why we won. They the other teams, Toronto that we played and St. Louis, did not hit well in postseason, and the reason for that was our pitchers were really good. They were performing well.
Well, in this series, you run into a really good team who, as I remember, were probably prohibitive favorites to win. You guys were a decided underdog. I always rooted for underdogs, even though my team wasn't there. So I enjoyed this series. You're down 3-1. You come back and win. And it was funny, George Orta, you talked about, he became a very pivotal figure in that comeback. And don't take this the wrong way, because I think really good teams and champions take advantage of when they get a break. I bring this up because I always have this conversation when we talk about umpires and people wanting to have more replay and robot umpires, and human error is part of sports, right? It's part of the sport, the players, and I think it is for umpires too. Right. And I really believe, Don, you know what I'm going here with Don Denkinger in that play at first base.
Yeah.
Without that play, if you guys don't win the World Series and the Cardinals win, I don't think that might be lost to history, and we don't remember that series the way we remember it, because you guys come back and win. You scored the winning run, if I remember right, on a head first slide in Game 6 play.
Yeah.
To me, it would have had a different feel to it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's true. Order was called safe, and he was out. And if we had the replay today, he would be out. And what would happen? I mean, if you go down that road and play that game, then my run would have been the tying run and not the winning run, and we wouldn't have known then who would have won that game.
Right.
And so, but because it was missed, any Cardinal fan alive remembers Game 6 of the '85 World Series and the play
Yeah.
at first. I mean, they bring that up every time I run into somebody, they bring that play up, and I say, look, if yeah, he was out, and had he been called out, uh, the way everything else would have played out, if you play it out the way it goes, then my run's the tying run, and
Yeah.
we don't know who's going to win after that. So anyway,
What
but
do you think? Do you think? Are you okay with the fact that Because I don't want robot umpires. I don't like as much replay as we use. I'm okay with human error affecting the outcome of the game because players' human error affects it as well. What are your thoughts overall? And you lived through something where it affected a game. So, what are your thoughts overall on that?
well, it's baseball's a hard game. I mean, the Hall of Famers fail 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah,
You can't, if you're an NFL quarterback, you got to pass 50% of the time. If you're an NBA basketball player, you got to make 50% of your shots. So it's a high failure rate, and so there is a lot of error on the player side, and you want it to be better on the umpire side, and I do like the replay. I miss the fights between the managers and the umpires.
right.
I kind of missed the theater of that. That was good theater, and you just don't have that as often. And but I do like the replays. I don't know how I feel about robots or machines calling balls and strikes. I'm
Yeah,
not sure how I feel about that at this point. It just it is what it is. I mean, for years we would have a chart on umpires in the locker room on their strike zone. Do they call high strikes? Do they call low strikes? Do they call it inside? Do they call it outside?
you
And
mean
so
as a team? As a team, you charted umpires? Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And so you would have a scouting report on a home plate umpire before the game started, but he may not be that way that night. He,
yeah,
he generally is that way, um, uh, uh, but I do like the replay. I like to get the play right, and it's a fast game, and it's hard sometimes being right there to get the play right. And but anyway,
yeah.
I'm not sure if they start doing it behind the plate. I'm not sure how I feel about that at this point.
Yeah, everything's getting so uh, you know computerized, whatever word we want to use. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. I gotta accept the times I'm living in. I guess a little better than I do. I lived back in
Yeah.
1970 and 80 too much. I guess my wife tells me so. I gotta be more accepting. You mentioned Dick Hauser and excited about going to Kansas City. Dick Hauser, growing up a Yankee fan, he was a Yankee coach for a long time and played a little with the Yankees. And I always liked Dick Hauser, and he got screwed, in New York when he won 100 plus games. He gets fired because he lost to the Royals in the
Right.
playoffs. Playing for Dick Hauser, was it good? And how much did his health issues the following year after winning the World Series affect this team and its performance?
Well, he was tremendous to play for. I mentioned earlier I played for 16 managers in 16 years. Well, he
Yeah.
was the best one, and I really respected him. He had a great knowledge of the game. He was very consistent. You knew what he expected. You knew what he liked and he didn't like. So you knew where the boundary lines were. And there were some players like Willie Wilson that would kind of at times push on those boundary lines, and Willie thought that Dick didn't like him. I said, no, it's not that, Willie. I said, you you try to go outside the box, and he tries to keep you in the box, and so there's the friction. But I think it's tough to repeat. We weren't playing well the day he left the field. It was the Sunday game right before the All Star break, and he came to the mound to take the pitcher out, and I looked at him, and he looked really tired. And I said, Dick, you look really tired. Do you feel okay? And he goes, I haven't been feeling very well. Well, the guy that came into the game was David Cohn, was the relief pitcher. And so uh, Dick left the mound. And then 3 days later, after the All-Star game, I think it was on Wednesday with the Tuesday All-Star game in '86, he passed out and they found out he had brain cancer. And
Yeah.
I think it added to our demise. The Rangers down here are having the World Series blahs right now. I mean, I think they're 9 or 10 games back, and they've been injured. They've had pitchers out. They've had regular lineup guys out, and they've had really a tough time. I think it's hard to repeat. And we just got off to a bad start, and then Dick got sick and was out the rest of the year, and the team just didn't respond.
Yeah. Really, it was a sad situation for sure. I was a big fan of Dick Hauser. One of the worst firings George ever did was firing Dick Hauser for sure.
Yeah.
Just to get move things along, because I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do have a couple of questions, and I want to finish up the audience questions. You spend a year in Chicago, which Chris has got a question about, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you end your career in full circle and go back to Texas. What did it mean to you to be able to get back there and end your career there?
Okay, I'm back. What was that last?
I was talking about the fact, you spent a year in Chicago, which I'll touch on in a minute, because Chris got a question, and I'll bring it up in a little bit. But you get back to Texas, and your career comes full circle. What was it like being able to have that opportunity?
Well, it was tremendous. I was sitting on the bench in Chicago for 2 years, and I had, in the spring of '88, I had asked if they would release me. And thinking that if they released me, I could go back to Texas. Well, they wouldn't release me at that point. It wasn't until mid-season of '88 that they released me, and I called up Tom Grieve, who was the general manager at that time and a former teammate. Former teammate, that I was getting released, and would it be possible to come back? And he said, sure. And so I went back and played the last year and a half there. There was a tribute on my last on the last day of the last day of the season at home. I got to catch Nolan Ryan. We won the game. I had the game winner, so it was a game-winning RBI. So it was a nice touch.
It's amazing, and you touched on this earlier, and you just brought it up again. I wonder how many catchers have caught a Hall of Fame pitcher their first game and a Hall of Fame pitcher their last game. I'll bet you it's not a long list. If it's more than one, I'm not even sure it's more than one.
Yeah, it's very unique, and I was fortunate to learn off of every one of them. I mean, Lee Smith, Raleigh Fingers, Burt Blyleven, Don Sutton, Gaylord Perry, Fergie, Nolan. I'm trying to think who else is in there, but what's that?
I said 8 or 9 Hall of Famers, but you mentioned David Cohn and some other guys that Brett Saberhagen's great pitchers that aren't Hall of Famers that were still pretty good.
And I caught Jamie Moyer, who really, in all sense, could be a veteran's pick someday.
There's a great question. We had a question in there about Jamie Moyer. Could you ever imagine that youngster who pitched till he was 50?
Yes. And I mean, I think he had close to 290 wins when it was all said and done. And he was one guy that I loved catching. It was just it was a joy catching for Jamie Moyer. It was I love catching finesse pitchers because it took a pitcher's location and it took strategy, game calling to get him through a game. And I love that.
I'm sure a little easier on your hand than catching Nolan Ryan too, I'm guessing.
Yes. Jim Bibby. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I tell my friends when they have kids, I like teach them to be left-handed because left-handers, they pitch forever in the major leagues. So if you got a little bit of talent, you can pitch for a long time. You developed a relationship did your relationship with Nolan Ryan start when you were teammates or before that? Because I know you brought him back into the Ranger organization as an executive later.
Right. We started really as teammates, and then I was in the front office and had the opportunity to broker Nolan coming to the team as the president, and so we had 6 years together in the front office, and it was a blast. Went to the World Series twice, and it was a blast working with Nolan and being there during that time.
What did you enjoy most after you retired? You did a lot of stuff. You broadcast for a number of years. You went into the private sector, as I mentioned at the top, and developed some training aids and such. And
Yeah.
you went into the front office. You've done motivational speaking. You've written books. What's been the most enjoyable part of your post baseball career, or maybe all of it?
It's really all of it. I think there's a little bit of me in my motivational abilities that is in each one of those. I love broadcasting, and I knew I was only going to do that for a short time because I really wanted to pursue having a business. And so I left broadcasting after 6 years and went to developing sports training materials. I had called the Practice Planner and the Skill Drills, and it was a product designed for where the coach dad could. It was a video and then a laminated guidebook where the coach dad could take the guidebook to practice and stay organized in a practice session with kids, and a
Mhm.
corresponding video that outlined everything that was in the book. And so and it went really well. It just was it was a I sold probably, I think, $1.5 million worth of product in a few years, but I was I was bankrolling it myself,
Yeah.
and we were needing to change up the video to a DVD, and the whole time they're thinking, gosh, if I could put this on my phone, like an app today is and I was thinking apps back in the year 2000, when we had Y2K, and I couldn't get it on an app at that point, but I had to make a decision to either put more money into it or dissolve it, and I went ahead and dissolved it and got back to baseball, and then ended up in baseball 13 years.
Hey, then the Rangers had a pretty good stretch, I think, during that 13 years
Yeah,
for a lot of it.
yeah.
And you enjoyed that part. And I know you, as I said before, you were instrumental in getting Nolan into the front office, where he was really trying to do some things, I thought, with the farm system in Texas and pitchers, and kind of change the way the grooming of pitchers was approached. And I just feel like he didn't get a chance long enough for it to
Yeah.
stick and spread out through
He
baseball.
he did a lot of good things, and in the time he was there, but one of them was he stretched. It was getting to be where pitchers were out of the game at 90 pitches, and he stretched them back into one more inning. He got them to 105 pitches, and other teams were starting to go in that direction again. They're
Yeah.
trying to get one more inning out of those guys, and so he implemented that. He worked with the pitchers a lot behind the scenes, but then was president basically, and it was a good run. We in the World Series in 10 and 11. Our best club was probably in 12, but to you go back to the difficulty in repeating is the grind, the number of games you're playing back to back seasons, and the Rangers had two World Series back to back, and they
Yeah.
just fizzled out in September of that third year to try to repeat, and couldn't do it. I mean, even they had a wild card tie and couldn't beat Baltimore for the wild card game,
Yeah.
and so but it was a great run during that time, Keith.
It still had to give you a great sense of pride for this team when they won last year, I would think, with your long, long history with the Ranger organization.
It really was, and we went to game one and two at home, and game one was a historic game. Seager hits a two-run homer in the bottom of the ninth, and then Garcia hits a home run. Seager hit the two-run home run to tie it, and then after being down by one, and then Garcia hit it in extra innings to win, and it was a crazy game and an amazing game to watch.
Before I finish up with just a couple questions from the group, I want to throw a couple names at you and ask real quick answers. David Clyde.
Extremely talented, immature. Billy Martin got the best of him.
Yeah.
And really probably hurt him. It's too bad.
A lot of talent there, right?
Yeah.
Very, very big shame. George Brett.
Best hitter that I played against or with. Just an amazing hitter. And in '85, you won a Gold Glove. He had a great defensive season, and
For sure.
and won the gold for that. But amazing competitor, leader, kind of a quiet leader, and loved to play.
Was there a catcher you emulated your game after, or wanted to live up to a standard? Was there a catcher that you looked up to?
Johnny Bench. I think.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Johnny Bench. People ask me about who do I think is the best, and I've kind of broken it down into generations, and the reason for that is in '86 I met Bill Dickey and struck up a relationship with him, and he used to call me and I would call him after that point in time. When he passed away, his wife called me and asked if I'd be a pallbearer for his funeral, and so I went into Little Rock to be a pallbearer, and she took me to their home afterwards and showed me a trophy that Bill had gotten from President Eisenhower, and it said the best catcher the first 50 years of baseball. And so I say, well, there's Bill Dickey, there's Johnny Bench, and there's Ivan Rodriguez. And take your pick. And for me, because I think Johnny was instrumental in changing the game, the catching game itself. There was a no hinge glove, a two-handed catchers at that time with a no hinge glove,
Yeah.
and he made a one hinge glove and he started the one-handed catchers, and so no more where catchers were breaking their fingers all the time.
Put his hand behind his back, right, to protect his hand.
Yeah.
I mean, defensively, not to, because you're sitting here in front of me, but I think at your peak defensively, I think you were as good as any of those guys. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I think so too. I had a pop time of 169 at one time, and I could get the ball to second base accurately as well as anybody. I could block well, received well, could frame pitches, and when really framing was more of an art. Today, I don't get what they do today. In yanking the pitches so much, but when framing was an art, and then game calling. So I think having all three, all of those things defensively put me in that category. I just needed to hit about 20, 25 points higher with a little more pop, and I was told that the Hall of Famers are in the top 1% of all players, and I was told by the president of the Hall of Fame that I'm in the top 2%. My career sets me there, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm all right with that, and it was a blast.
You talk about the pitch framing. Somebody in the promo, they put up a comment to make sure we talked about pitch framing and the way catchers catch today on one knee and things like that, and how the approach to playing the position has changed. Do you have any thoughts on that overall?
Well, the framing thing where it kind of looked like they yanked the ball into the strike zone.
Yeah.
That would never work with in my generation, and talking to the umpires, they didn't necessarily like that. Now the getting down on the knee, which I didn't understand for the longest time. I talked to Bob Boone last year, and his son, is the Yankee manager.
Yeah.
And they said they get him down on one knee because analytics show that there are more strikes called if the catcher is down on one knee.
Amazing.
And so I go, well, all right, if that's the case, but it does hinder. I think it hinders blocking, it hinders throwing,
Yeah.
And so I would have a tough time doing that.
Yeah. Anytime I hear analytics, my brain starts to freaking convulse. I want to ask you about one more player. One more player. He only had 6 at bats. I don't know if you're going to remember. He's a little bit of a, but he got a local tie here. He played at Santa College. He played basketball. He played baseball. Gary Holly. Do you remember Gary Holly at all?
No.
1979, he played with the Rangers. He had 6 at bats. He was a pretty good prospect at one point, but never really topped off. You don't remember Gary? He's left-handed hitter.
Gary Holly, you mean in 79 in the big leagues?
He had 6 at bats in 1979.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, he went to Siena College up here in the capital area in New York. It was where he graduated from. So I thought I'd throw that out there. Yeah. It's fine. That's fine. When there's a local tie-in, I like to kind of go there.
I can't believe that I don't remember that.
That's okay. I mean, again, it's you play with a lot of players over your career. To remember a guy who had 6 at bats is probably asking you a lot.
Yeah.
A couple questions here, John. Oh, sorry, John. I didn't see this. This isn't for you, but John DeLon's a big follower of all my shows, and he wanted to let me know. I hope you're feeling better. He said he was in ER. He didn't make my college show the other night, so hope you're feeling better, John. How you faced Nolan Ryan and caught Nolan Ryan? How fearsome was he? I mean, when he was with the Angels, he still had a little. His control wasn't quite as good as it was later in his career. What was it like facing him throwing 100 plus every night?
Well, it could be rather intimidating because he was known to throw. The pitches kind of got away from him a little bit at times, and but he threw hard. The biggest thing was his curveball. He had such an amazing curveball that he could start at what looked like at your face, and it would come across for a strike. And the combination of throwing his fastball inside and starting his curveball inside was rather intimidating. And you knew that if he was getting his curveball over that night, there might be a chance he could throw a no-hitter. And but it wasn't going to come on his curveball. It was going to come on a fastball. Even as good a fastball as he had, players would eventually catch up to it. And when I faced him, I figured I'm not going to hit his curveball. I'm going to try to hit his fastball and do something with it.
Smart. This question, my guess is, I'm going to make a guess here. Who was the hardest pitcher that you had to catch? I'm going to say either Nolan or Gaylord, because Gaylord, you might be coming out of a puff of rosin or baby powder or whatever he was throwing that puff ball with. Who was the hardest catcher you had to catch? Or pitcher you had to catch?
Actually, they were. Gaylord wasn't too bad. Nolan could be tough to catch because of being a little erratic in the strike zone. But Charlie Huff, knuckleballer.
Yeah, I should have thought of Charlie.
He was the hardest. I hated that. I hated the knuckleball. Catching that.
He pitched with the Rangers.
You don't catch it. You just kind of, you just kind of knock it to the ground and pick it up and throw it back.
I think. Oh gosh, who's the announcer for the Brewers? I can't think of his name all of a sudden.
Bob Uecker.
Bob Uecker had that line all the time. He said he would just, chase it to the backstop and pick it up and throw it back to the pitcher. So.
Well, it was. I mean, Charlie, you just didn't. It was hard. It was hard. But he mastered it.
Yeah, Dave's asked you, and we talked about this a lot already. How did you get along with Billy? Overall, I mean, do you think you had a good relationship with Billy overall? I know
I think so. I mean, he talked when he was with the Yankees. He would talk with me. He would talk. We'd have conversations. So I think as bad as it was in the second season, I think it overall ended up well.
Chris is talking about your year in. He knows you as synonymous with the Cubs. You only spent 1 year there, but he was a kid in 1988 and had your Topps card. What was your time like in Chicago? I don't know how great that team was, actually, Chris, but certainly good history. What was your time like in Chicago?
Well, it wasn't a great team, but Andre Dawson was MVP one year. It was hard because uh, I had been a starting catcher my first 13 years, and then when I went to the Cubs in my 14th and 15th season, I sat on the bench and was back up to Jody Davis, and so it was a hard adjustment for me. But loved Chicago, lived in Lake Point Towers downtown when it was an apartment complex, and loved that. And then lived out north of town the second year I was there. But loved Chicago, and having grown up in Illinois, I've always loved going to Chicago.
And that's a great question that Rick's got about the books. Was there something you saw from your parents, or I'll say other parents too, when you were young that triggered you writing the books?
Well, I think both. I think uh, uh, one is I had kind of a rough relationship with my dad. I had a father that I couldn't please,
Mhm.
and I was never doing well enough. And I wanted to make sure that message came out in the book, and that it was not a good approach. And but I always wanted to write a book, and when sat with an editor, book company to write one, he goes, "Well, what about something on sports parenting? Because it looks like to me that a lot of parents need something about that."
Absolutely.
And I came to realize that the uh, the parents that need it really probably wouldn't buy it. They're someone else buys it and gives it to them. That's what I found out in that process.
I had a guy who used to work for me. I managed salespeople and have for decades, and this guy was very difficult with people. And I gave him a book one time for Christmas, and it was Dale Carnegie's, how to win friends and get
Yeah,
along with people. And he didn't even get the inference why he should be that, which explained a lot of his problem. He was not very
yeah.
self-reflective. So let me finish up. I always let Chris. He's always got the last questions we ask. It'll be, what's Jim up to today? So a couple things. Where are you living now today? You're back in Illinois? Or are you in Texas?
No, I'm actually in Texas. I'm in Arlington.
Okay, that's
I'm
right.
still in Arlington, where the
Huh.
Cowboys and the Rangers play.
A lot of you guys there's so many retired ball players, baseball, football around that area. It's amazing.
Well, there's no state income tax.
Yeah. Listen, I've been trying to talk my wife into Tennessee or Texas or whatever. Like, living in New York can be very expensive, by the way. I can tell you
Yeah.
right now. What's the food scene out in Arlington?
What's the what?
The food scene. What is it? A good? You enjoy the places you get out to? Great places to go, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. There's good places in Arlington, but we're fortunate. We got Fort Worth and we've got Dallas,
Yeah.
and so it's one of the best places you could go to for food. I mean, it is tremendous. They've got every kind of chain and every kind of restaurant that there is, and plus individual boutique kind of restaurants that are great.
And what kind of music is Jim Sundberg listening to today?
Well, down here is country western.
That's me.
Uh, Country western is a pretty good theme down here.
And good for you?
Uh, yeah, I sometimes I actually listen to Christian music, and most of the time, and then I like country western
Yeah.
that I listen. I actually have a lot of grandkids and kids that listen to country western.
8 grandkids I saw. Is that right?
11 now.
11. Oh, I guess it's an old number I saw. That's
Well,
I can't
it's
keep up
11.
with one. I can't keep up with one. I don't know how you do it. 8. Jeez.
It's better than parenting.
Well, I will say that's true. It's fair. You get to have fun. Send them home with the parents. That's always fun.
Yeah.
And any books you're reading is his last question. This is usually what I leave for Chris before we end up.
I'm more of a writer than a reader, and
Interesting.
but here's one that's actually I got it here on my bookshelf. Let me see if I can.
Grit.
Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's a great book,
Interesting.
and it talks about it talks about what it takes to succeed, the elements of succeeding, passion and perseverance, and so it's a one of my favorite books.
Great stuff. Listen, Jim, I appreciate you coming on. Everybody, please look up Jim's book. I'll be posting them to books, plural. I'll get them posted to the TGI Sports Talk Facebook page and my personal page. Jim, I appreciate you coming on. As always, I go, the shows go over because I get talking to you guys, and I could talk all day about the era that you played in and your career and the people you played with. And I appreciate your patience with me. We got the technical problems straightened out at some point, so I apologize for that, but I appreciate you coming in. Any last words you want to leave us with?
No, I really enjoyed it. Great interview. You do your job well, and just hi to the fans out there, and thanks for your support.
Well, I appreciate that. Stick around real quick. I'll say a proper goodbye. Guys, thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for all the questions. We'll see you later on today with the MLB update. We're going to talk. Let me turn that down a little bit first. We're going to talk a lot about the late Willie Mays, obviously, and we'll get you caught up on all the news today. Sunday Stream of Consciousness on Sunday morning. And next week, our guest will be Dennis Rasmussen, former Yankee, Red, and I think a couple other teams. And a few weeks, we'll have Brett Saberhagen, as I mentioned. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later on this afternoon. Keith Engle for TGI Sports Talk, one-on-one with Keith Engle. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.